Namaste. Psychoanalysis, Part 7, Addressing a Fiction. In psychotherapy, we deal more with fantasy than reality. Much of what we do goes to addressing some fantasy element. It is strange that it be so, and to explore it more, we enter into a conversation with our guide, psychoanalysis consultant Himanshu Vaidya. Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
So, does psychoanalysis address reality or fantasy?
Psychoanalysis, like any other form of psychotherapy, is helpless in front of reality. There is little we can do to change anything outside the therapy room. So, when it comes to somebody suffering from reality, say for example, somebody has lost a family member in an accident, or somebody has lost money on the stock exchange, and everything is gone and nothing is left now. Or there was a natural calamity like an earthquake and somebody has lost everything and everyone.
Right.
In such situations, when somebody is suffering from reality, there is little psychoanalysis or any form of psychotherapy can do to change the reality outside. All we can do is to help the person cope better with the tragedy. So there, all we do is reality acceptance, which involves catharsis, mourning, and a slow reality acceptance coupled with support to restart life all again. So psychoanalysis or psychotherapy, any form, can do little when it comes to reality. That, I think, would be 25% of the cases that we handle, or even less than that. 75% or more cases that we handle are essentially cases dealing not with reality, but with fantasy, with some belief, some fiction. Something which is no longer true in reality, but is true in the subjective world of the person who suffers. And this is where one way to define psychoanalysis is to say it is largely a science of fiction, a science that deals with fiction. Right? Fiction not of any type. We are not dealing with science fiction or fiction related to humor or animation. We are dealing with one specific type of fiction, the fiction which is at the root of pathology. And in that restricted sense of the word fiction, psychoanalysis definitely is a science of fiction. What happens here is the person has some belief, a belief which is false but is very strong. What we would say wrong and strong. This wrong and strong belief which exists in the unconscious of the person and which is not modified regardless of the conscious mind knowing the contrary of that belief being true. It is such beliefs that psychoanalysis deals with. In fact, not only psychoanalysis, even other forms of psychotherapy have to deal with it. CBT calls it core belief. The core belief is not necessarily a true belief.
True.
Most often than not, it's a false belief. But still, that false belief is the core belief. It's a cognitive distortion at a very fundamental level. Now, psychoanalysis tries to address this fiction, which in the subjective world of the patient is more powerful than reality. In a sense, therefore, psychoanalysis is a fiction therapy. And these fictions take on various colors and flavors. At the root, we have a few generic fictions. Just as in the world of the colors, we have 3 primary colors, and then they combine to create millions of colors. Similarly, in our area, we have a few generic fictions. And these generic fictions give rise to varieties of manifestations, alone as well as in conjunction with each other. And that creates this whole world of pathology and all the sicknesses that we try to deal with. So in that sense, psychoanalysis is less a science of reality and more a science of fiction.
As many as times you quote it being a science of fiction, specifics are falling. Can you give some examples of common fiction psychoanalysis addressing on an everyday basis?
The fiction, as I said, they come in all colors and flavors. Let us start with some of the common fictions which are at the root of and the central findings of all schools of psychoanalysis. The first fiction is the fear of loss. Second fiction is the fear of attack, the fear of abandonment, the fear of rejection, the fear of being robbed, the fear of losing everything, catastrophic thinking in all its forms, the fear of being castrated by an authority figure, the fear of being attacked by a difficult object, the fear of something going wrong. I am not good enough, despite the fact that there is evidence in reality that we are good enough. So all these are fictions which we deal with on an everyday basis. And this constitutes almost 75% of our work. That the person is suffering from, like, take for some examples. Dependent personality, always fearful of losing somebody. A narcissistic personality, always fearful of losing control of somebody. A schizoid personality, fearful of getting close to anybody, that he will betray, attack, or leave. An avoidant person, fearing attack from somebody. A psychotic person undergoing delusion of persecution, fearing attack from somebody. A person having isolation of affect, fearing his own feelings. So these are some of the common fictions which underlie much of human suffering. We suffer more out of fiction than out of reality. And this is true of the developing and developed world. In the underdeveloped world, it is reality which is more the cause of suffering than fiction. But in developing and developed world, once the survival and safety concerns are taken care of, and you don't have to fear death by starvation or by anybody shooting you at every turn, you don't have to fear somebody taking away your property or a family member. So once you are in the developing or the developed world, largely the suffering is out of fiction rather than of reality. That is not to say there is no reality fiction, but I would say it's 75-25. 75% of the suffering is out of the deep-seated unconscious fiction, which is at the root of pathology. So these are some of the specifics that we keep dealing with on an everyday basis. Take just for example, I am not good enough. How many times do we prove to the patient with real life examples that you are good enough, but it just does not erase the I am not good enough at the roots. And this is what brings us to this central difficult fact of life, that difficult fiction which is created early in life is very difficult to erase. And it is not by winning an argument, a cognitive argument, or by convincing the conscious mind or the will that the battle can be won. If we could win a battle against such fiction by objective convincing of the mind or by exercise of willpower, there would not be anything like psychosis or any chronic sickness.
True.
Right? I mean, leave apart the biology heavy sicknesses like mental retardation.
Right.
But out of 22 chapters of DSM, we would not have 75% of 18 chapters of DSM, because they deal with chronic sicknesses. And we would not have these chronic sicknesses if erasing this fiction by logic or by objective fact of reality was so easy. So the fiction which is created early in life is very difficult to erase. It's almost like there are three materials on which you write in the context of the mind. You can write on sand, you can write on limestone, and you can write on concrete. And writing in early childhood is like writing on concrete. And once the concrete solidifies, it's very difficult to erase. Later on in life, in the teenage, it's like writing on the limestone. And after 25, it's like writing on the sand. You can write quickly and erase quickly. But earlier you go in life, you move from writing on the sand to writing on the limestone to writing on the concrete. And what we find is the fiction is very, very concrete. The fiction has more strength than something concrete in the objective world. So psychoanalysis tries to deal with this fiction in concrete, so to say. This fiction cast in concrete is what is the trouble. And therefore, we see that therapies which deal with the conscious mind and the exercise of the will often are not able to go very far in difficult sicknesses like psychosis or personality disorders, because the fiction is cast strong in concrete.
Contrary to what facts you're bringing in forth, sir, that's somewhere I'm getting in touch with this belief system that rather psychoanalysis is the only way to go closest to exploring that part, because rest, even if it is the reality and the previous templates have been formed in the childhood, which can be as early as an infantile stage, psychoanalysis is the only school which can actually go till that level to find the root cause as compared to other schools.
Right.
So in that way, it seems to be in more effective to reach, even if it is a realistic fantasy.
Correct.
Because the response to real life situation would be coming from the pre-templates formed
Right.
in the early years.
Correct.
So somewhere I just, while you were explaining beautifully how it got concreted in the first initial years, and then in the teenage, the belief system is still, there can be some modifications made. But our school of psychoanalysis is the only which can reach till there.
Yeah, correct. And I'll just add something to what you said.
Okay.
What you said is very correct. We find this again and again in the area of psychotherapy, that deep-seated things cannot be dealt with very effectively, regardless of what people say in public, and regardless of a few papers here and there. Unless you go to the very root, and at the very root, the human mind is not a rational machine. It is more irrational rather than rational. And unless that deep-seated realm of fantasy is explored and the affect which is bound there is released, we don't see lasting changes. Now, what we see here is there is a sort of a contest of power. There is a power of reason, which is one power acting in the mind, and this power of fiction, the power of fantasy, another power acting in the mind. And between these two powers, the power of fiction usually wins over the power of reasoning. And this is especially true when it comes to very deep-seated, very early formed complexes. And often we find that even after long therapy, what happens is 75% of the healing has happened, and the last 25% turns into a syntheon. It's a Lacanian term, syntheon. It's like,
Okay. And
let's say somebody has come to you for narcissistic personality disorder. Now it's very rare, but let us say somebody has come. Okay. And let us say he stays. That also is rare, but let us say he stays. So
let the X be the student of psychology trying to explore his own
correct.
narcissism.
So let X be a student of psychoanalysis and let X come to you and let X stay with you. So once this three things are met, let us say it goes on for 3 to 4 years. And at the end of 3 to 4 years of, say, twice a week or thrice a week of therapy for 3 to 4 years, the person has been able to overcome 75% of his trouble. Now 25% remains. But what remains has a different characteristic now. What has happened is, now the symptom is separated from the suffering. Earlier, symptom and suffering are together. Where there is symptom, there is suffering. Now, the suffering is separated from the symptom.
When you see that, sorry to interrupt you, sir. When you say that the symptom has separated from the suffering, is it the effect generated has gone lower compared to what it was in the initial times?
I'll give you an example and can come back to the discussion. Let me give an example from a Lacanian folklore.
Okay.
In the Lacanian folklore, there is a popular example. The example is this. A person had an obsessive habit that he would go to a bar, he would drink, he would come out of the bar, move a few paces ahead, and he would urinate on the wall.
Oh.
This was the obsession. And he would do it every day. He underwent a Lacanian analysis, and after 10 years, he comes back to the same bar, drinks, urinates, again comes back to the bar and sits in peace. So the bartender asks him, what has happened to 10 years of therapy? You're still doing the same thing. He says, yes, but two things are different. Now I know why I am doing it and I don't suffer from it. Coming back to our discussion, so this is what Lacan calls a symptom. That the symptom has changed into a symptom, meaning 75% of symptom has been cured, and what 25 remains, two characteristics are very important about it. One, it is deeply understood by the person. Understanding so profound that it ceases to cause any resistance or disgust or anger towards oneself or anybody else in him. It's a very profound understanding of the symptom, and it does not cause suffering to the person or a very mild thing. So either there is no suffering or a mild suffering, and the person has learned to live with it now. So this remnant of that difficulty, where 75% is cured or 80-90% is cured and rest of it remains, but is so profoundly understood that the person knows why he is doing, and he also knows why he can't stop doing it, and the suffering is negligible, and the person's quality of life is very high now compared to what it used to be before. So this remnant is the syntheon. Now what is happening here is the contest of power between the rational part and the unconscious fiction has tilted in favor of reason, but has not been able to erase the fiction completely.
Fair enough.
The fiction clings onto the mind, just as life clings on to many people who want to commit suicide.
True.
So this fiction clings onto the mind, does not let go. And although it does not cause much suffering, it has turned into a syntheon, but still the power of reason, despite everything, is not able to erase it. something happens that the erasure is prohibited. Now, we don't know exactly what it is that prohibits the erasure, but the erasure is prohibited. But yes, the power contest has shifted in favor of reason and in favor of freedom.
So you were giving example of the X person being a narcissist and coming for the therapy.
Huh?
In context of that, you were when I had put across this effect of symptoms
Oh,
being...
yes. Sorry. I just got off track.
No.
Coming back to that example, let us say the person comes to you for therapy, 75% is cured. Certain parts remain, but now he understands why he does what he does. And he also understands if he was to stop those things, what would be the outcome of it. And between those choices, he prefers to have a mild symptom rather than to undertake the pain of healing it. So now he has some of the narcissistic traits. He understands them. Occasionally, when they come out unconsciously, he leaves them out and then he has a smile on the face because he knows what he has just done. And occasionally, he may even try to correct the unconscious manifestation post-manifestation.
True.
And his quality of life has improved because he knows himself much better. Much of him has changed. What has not changed, he understands. And in that, the suffering has separated from the symptom. So 25% symptom is there, but the suffering is less than 5%. Because there is a substantial divorce of suffering from the symptom. It has turned into a symptom. So what would happen there is that your work with him has established reason and the healthy part of the psyche in 90% of him, but complete erasure from the roots is not possible. So that is how it would be, that the power balance has shifted, but the power of reason is not able to erase completely from the roots the personality disorder. So often this happens that you can reduce the strength of the fiction substantially, but not erase the fiction completely at its roots.
So when the psyche is debating reasoning over the initial belief systems, the previous templates of the belief system, doesn't it bring us to the power of belief in the arena of the mind?
It does. It does. And what happens there is, it brings us to the very important fact of human mind, that belief is far more powerful than reason, especially in the area of pathology. And earlier the belief has set in, the more powerful it is. The more affect that was involved while the belief was set in, the more powerful it is. The more it has been reinforced over a period of time, the more powerful it is. The more it gets validation from the world that it is correct, the more powerful it is. And once all of this happens and the person comes to you at 35, you are dealing with something which is frozen in concrete. And it's not easy to wet the concrete again, make it plastic again, and erase it or give it a different mold. Freud put it very succinctly. He says, the goal of psychoanalysis is, where id is, there ego shall be. Where this fiction is, there reason shall be. Where this subjective fantasy is, there objective fact will be. But we all know how difficult it is.
It is.
Right? And we know it in ourselves and in our patients and in everybody else, how difficult it is to overcome the power of belief. And this is not only proved in psychoanalysis, this is proved even in medicine. The whole area of placebo, what is it? It's about the belief. Right? In military training, what is it about? It's all about honor and belief. Believe that you will win. And in many battles, we see this actually comes true. The one who believes he will win ultimately wins. So this power of belief is not something unique to psychoanalysis. It is as much true in military studies, as much true in medicine when you talk of placebo or you talk of nocebo. There is a famous study where a group was divided into two. The group which was having pain was divided into two, and they were told you will be given painkillers. And one group was not given painkillers, and they were told you are given a very strong painkiller. And the other group was given morphine, the strongest of painkillers, and the group was told you have not been given any painkiller, it's just water. And many of the people who were given painkillers reported the pain was still on. And many of the people who were not given painkillers reported the pain had gone.
Gone.
So we have many placebo studies of that type, rigorous scientific studies. So the power of belief is something very, very central to the human mind. And one manifestation is in psychoanalysis, where the person unconsciously holds on to the belief. Right? Take, for example, somebody who fears water. Right? No amount of reasoning will suffice. He will hold on to the belief that water is dangerous for me. You can show him all the movies of beaches, people celebrating. You can even show him the beach from 100 meters. Nothing will turn the belief. So it's only in the mild to moderate cases that we will see gradual desensitization and those kind of things working. Exposure therapy. In the severe cases, unless you go to the root, no amount of objective reasoning will help. So the power of the mind, the power of belief in the mind is a very strong belief, very strong power. And this is what we are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. The power of early childhood pathological fictions, which have turned upside down the quality of life of the person and are at the root of his suffering.
And that also brings into the fact that sometimes with the stuck therapy, if the therapist has worked beyond resistances, also the defenses, there the tragic holding or the core belief keeps on creating the effect, which can be altered, but yes, it would keep on creating the effect.
Right, very true.
So can we go deeper into these power dynamics of fact versus fiction in the mind?
Yeah. So it's a very good question that why early childhood beliefs are so strong. Why is it that if you create a new belief in the adult period, why it is not able to counterbalance the early childhood beliefs? What is the source of this great power that early childhood beliefs have? Right? That the person goes for therapy, spends hundreds of sessions and so much of money and time just to overturn one fictional belief. Why does one suffer so much from a fiction? And this brings us to the deeper dynamics of the mind. And the deeper dynamics point out to this, that the early childhood beliefs are because of certain reasons. What gives power to early childhood beliefs? One is the totality of experience. That the mind is not dispersed in engagement with 10 different things like an adult mind is. The mind is focused only on one experience. So first is the totality of experience. Second is the blank canvas. That the memory spaces are not yet occupied. The canvas is blank. Third is very high life energy available for experience because it has not been blocked in 100 different events.
True.
Fourth is the lack of attenuating variables. What we learn later You don't take to heart this kind of things. This kind of things keep happening. Experiences over a period of time, gradual desensitization, repetition of experiences, monotony of experiences. These things have not yet happened. Another important element is the absence of language. Because the absence of language and therefore the absence of normal reasoning, that's a very big contributor. Then you have the fantasy working of the mind, which has not yet developed into the normal working that adults have. So initially, we are fumbling to think just as we fumble to walk. So just as we learn walking by fumbling and falling, we also learn thinking by fumbling and falling in the cerebral sense of the term. And we are fumbling and falling in the ocean of fantasy. And all of that leads to very high storage of affect, very high sensitivity, and therefore very high power of early life memories. And therefore memories of early life have usually far greater power than memories which come later. And memories which come later, the power is graded based upon the content of memory. For example, you go to a railway station and buy a ticket, or you see accident on the road. The feelings involved in both are very different. But the feelings generated are graded according to the intensity of experience. Everything is not high affect experience, which is true in childhood. That practically everything is a high affect experience. We are nearing the end of the first part. We'll continue the discussion in the second part.